How's it going? That's not even close to being good enough. How's it going? Yeah, that's better. Welcome to Summit 2015. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for coming to the Fireside the night before. Thanks for coming to drinks in about an hour. Yeah, there you go. Excited to see you. Whose first summit is it? Let's get a hand. How about, keep your hands up, Summit number 2. Summit number 3. Who's been here for 5 or more summits? Stand up. Yeah, round of applause. And wait for it. If you've been here to all 7 summits, stand up on your chair. Stand up on your chair. Give a round of applause for these guys. Good. And then one more thing. If you are at Summit right now, stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Only because I want a selfie of a standing ovation. Just to get that. You can sit back down. So we've got a great couple of days planned for you. And we're so excited to pull it off because you mean so much to us. Like, we would be nothing without customers. So from the bottom of our hearts, from me first, you're going to hear it hopefully a lot. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being our customers. Thanks for trusting us to be a part of how your teams work. Over the next 2 days, you're going to hear a lot about teams. You're going to hear a lot about our products, new products, improvement in products, and ways that we're trying to make our products make a bigger difference for how your teams work. But we know that it's not just products that make great teams. Culture is a huge part of what helps teams realize their ultimate potential. Culture is something that is deeply important to Atlassian. We obsess over it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about culture tonight over the next hour. There's going to be a little bit of structure to it because really important part of culture are the rituals and practices that inform how teams do what they do. And so there's 3 specific rituals that we have at Atlassian that are deeply important to how our teams work. And we wanted to drill down into what those are, where they came from, what inspired them or what catalyzed them, and how we use them to get the most out of Atlassian teams. And who better to talk about not just those 3 things, but about culture broadly, but the original architects of our culture. Give a big Summit 2015 round of applause to our co-founders and co-CEOs, Scott Farquhar and Mike Cannon-Brookes. All right. You ready for this? I don't know if I'm ready for this. I think this is also known as a career-limiting move, maybe, depending on how the questions are. Okay, so before we get into the 3 things, I just wanted to provide like a little bit of setup on culture, just to frame some of the things that we'll talk about. Culture, as part of a team or as part of a company, I think everyone would agree is really important. But a lot of us might define it differently. I'm interested, maybe, Scott, to start with you. What does culture mean to you? How do you define it?
Before I begin, I know you thanked the crowd before we got on stage, but I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone in the audience for coming to Summit, coming early to hear us tonight. Without you, we wouldn't have a company or a company culture to talk about. And I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone here for supporting us and making Atlassian the incredible company we have today. So yeah, huge thank you to everyone in the audience. So I define culture and values as different. The values are the part of an organization that never changes. It's what you hold true as a company. And I think the values, at least in startups or companies of our age, reflect the founders. And so for good or bad, a lot of the early things or the values of what we hold true at Atlassian were really the values that Mike and I held true. Culture, on the other hand, is how work gets done in a company. And that changes over time because how work gets done in a 20-person organization is very different to how work gets done in a 200 or 2,000-person organization. You can't just walk down to someone down the hall and say, can you get something done? It needs to go through different processes. And so I think, culture is how work gets done.
So, Mike, we've grown a lot since you and Scott started the company. How does the size of a company, affect or influence culture, and how does culture change as we've gotten bigger? How has culture changed, and what are the parts that we've been able to retain?
Look, I think the people is still the most important ingredient of culture. People often ask, how did we create the Atlassian culture? And I'm like, I don't know that we did, as much as we were very studious about every single person we added to the team, because they bring their own sort of ingredients that you put into this melting pot, right? And so I think the bigger you get, you have to make sure you don't take the attention off each individual hire, and you make sure that cascades down, right? We no longer interview everybody that works here, but we still hire amazing people, and I think that's because, it's just kind of cascaded down through the layers, and I think that attention to detail on hiring and making sure that you hire culture first is the most important ingredient that often gets lost as you get bigger, right? And then the second one is to make sure that people understand it's okay for culture to change, right? It's almost like culture change is a bad thing, and actually it's not. It's more like an evolution. As Scott said, it is different at 2,000 people than it is at 20 people, but it doesn't necessarily need to be bad, right? We used to have a much more, I guess, simple culture when we began, and it's a lot more complicated at the moment, but it's sort of got a lot more different flavors and ingredients, and there's a lot more things going on than there were when we had 20 people. We had sort of almost like one set of interests, and then we have lots of different sets of interests, and so we can get a lot more diversity of thought and different types of opinions and different types of experiences, which makes it a much richer place, right? It's like not a simple ingredient like it is when you've got a very small team.
So you mentioned some parts of our culture were created organically. They were brought in by people. They're influenced just sort of naturally in it. And some parts, like the values, were created deliberately. What are some examples, maybe from both of you, of parts of the culture that kind of evolved organically? Like, what's an example of that for people?
Well, we're going to talk later about Shipit, right? That was something that we came up with, where we decided that we couldn't do 20% time at that stage. We saw Google and these other companies doing it, and then we thought, well, if we could instead of doing it once a week, but we just do it once a quarter, and we did that. So that was an example of something that did organically. I think you're going to throw next slide, if I can see it in front of you, is the T-shirts that we generated at Atlassian here. And that's been a big part of Atlassian culture, is that our way of celebrating some success is to print a T-shirt. And we have thousands of T-shirts now. We have to make a coffee table book one day of all the Atlassian T-shirts. And I've actually got hundreds of old ratty T-shirts there one day when they're collector's items, stored in my cupboard. So if anyone wants an old ratty 10-year-old Atlassian T-shirt, come see me after the show. So yeah, T-shirts are a big part. Melbourne Cup, which ran yesterday, is a horse race in Australia that Mike actually was a big fan of when he was younger.
First female winner ever in history yesterday. It was a huge
so it's
day.
The equivalent of a Super Bowl in the US, and so Australia stops for a horse race, and since the beginning we've always celebrated that. So we've got dressed up when there were 10 of us and went down to the local pub, and now we actually take all of Sydney out. So we have 800 people get dressed up in their black tie to go out to watch a horse race. So there's just those sort of things we started when we were small.
Any other organic, little bits of tradition that came out of either an inspiration from someone or just sort of organically grew for you?
I think it's important to celebrate rituals, like sort of things that emerge. You couldn't script them. We have this strange, I don't know if you call it a ritual, but like if people clap on various floors of the office, the clapping just kind of spreads throughout the entire floor, and everyone just goes a bit mad for a second, and then it stops. And you don't know why the people clapped in the first place. But that's
awesome.
Not really the point, right? I think a lot of logical engineers are like, why are we clapping? It doesn't matter, right? Somebody somewhere, see, look at that. It's one of those rituals that you see new people, because no one tells you about it. It's not like you join and you get a little list and it's like, oh, by the way, if people clap, you clap too. It's just evolved, and it's gotten a little bigger, and now it's spread to different offices, and it happens in San Francisco, it happens in Sydney. It's just a little thing that somebody one day started, and you've kind of built on it, and it's been repeated, and it's become a ritual and like a little piece of the tapestry.
Actually, in our Austin office, and this is where individual people bring their own traditions or that they've developed elsewhere. So our head of our Austin office has a tradition that when someone new starts, they have a breakfast. I think it's once a week or once a month, where all the new people come, and they have to tell either some hidden talent, an embarrassing story, or a hidden tattoo. are your choices to reveal to people. And it's been fascinating. We've had people that play an amazing instrument or some crazy stories about some embarrassing stories, and hidden tattoos we can't maybe go into in good company what have been shared. So I like things like that.
What are the threats to culture, and how do you avoid them? Scott? What threats are as a company either evolves or gets bigger or changes or has different competitive dynamics? What are the things that you need to be protective of?
I think it comes down to just people fitting the culture. There's no right or wrong culture. I think Goldman Sachs has a very different culture to the Red Cross, different to Atlassian, and what you really want is people that fit your culture. And as we grow, what you want to do is make sure that culture fit is more important than employee performance. And there was, even at Atlassian, there was someone that a little while ago everyone thought was an arsehole, basically. And I asked people, well, why are they still here? And then, we sort of made the choice that, hey, they're not really right for Atlassian, but it was sort of instructive that even as you get larger, you need to spend more time sort of explaining to people that, hey, culture is more important than their job performance, and I will support you at making sure that we, hire the right people and, let people leave the company if they don't fit that culture. And I think that you sort of got to reinforce it that way.
If you could only take one thing with you from Atlassian's culture into a new company or a new thing that you were creating, what would that be?
I think openness, probably. I think we're a very open company. We share a lot externally, internally, and I think it's one of our kind of secret ingredients, and it's very painful. It's not a simple weapon that you can deploy. It has a lot of downsides. It has a lot of pain and difficulty associated with it, but net, I think it's been a huge positive for us in terms of learning and sharing and continuing to go forward, and that ability to be open and honest internally. As long as it's done in the proper way, I think is probably one of our secret ingredients, and I would take with me, I guess, to Mars or wherever. Where are we going?
Where?
To the next place, right.
To next.
Yeah.
Someplace
sure.
next. Scott, what would you take?
I don't know if I could top that, actually. I think I was trying to go through our values, and I think open company really is the foundation.
So you're taking the easy way out and using Mike's answer.
I use Mike's answer, what he said.
So that's maybe a good transition to values. The slide works.
It's a very strange, this is not a scripted presentation, so don't get the wrong idea. It's kind of like a slide deck that Jay has put with some questions, and we haven't rehearsed any answers. So
slide deck
I'm fascinated to see how this whole thing works.
Frames the questions.
We'll see.
So these are our values, and we've talked about them before, and some people may have heard this story, but I'm interested, what catalyzed the creation of these? What was the moment where you guys decided we need values for the company? And I guess a related question is, what was there before?
As I said, when you start a company, the values reflect the founders. And I think the first 50 people that we hired across Atlassian, Mike and I interviewed and hired personally. And then I think the next 50 people, we were less involved in the interview process, but we hadn't put any values in place or really structured about the types of people we were looking for. And one day, we sort of looked at the people who were coming to join Atlassian because we had free food and a pool table and ping pong and all these perks, and people were joining Atlassian because of the perks, not because we build amazing software that helps teams to change the world. And then we sat down and said, well, why are we attracting the wrong sort of people, or people who are attracted for the wrong reasons? And it's because we never sat down and said, hey, here are the reasons, the things Mike and I look for in our employees, and codify that. And so what we did is we took a group of our early staff members away on an offsite and said, okay, if you were going to rebuild Atlassian, what are the properties you'd look for? And they came up with one set themselves. And then we took our senior management team away and got them to do the same exercise, and they came back with a different set. And it turned out about 80% of those things were overlapping. And that's what you see today in terms of the values, was that 80% of what both our early employees and our management team thought was true about Atlassian. And they're not aspirational, they're not sort of we want to grow into them. They're really what we believe is the essence of Atlassian, and should we try and find and hire more people like that into the company.
Do you remember any that were nixed? Like anything left on the cutting room floor? The fifth Beatle of Atlassian's values?
I think there was a lot of discussion around products, things like that. There was a huge discussion around whether it was building with heart and balance or creating with heart and balance. I remember that for days on, were we creating things or building things? What are the subtleties of those two words? And I don't know, there was entire values that got left on the cutting room floor. I did want to add to Scott's answer. I mean, I think that last part is really important. I mean, we have a lot of customers from a lot of different types of companies, and often we get that, it's great that you guys have these values, but I can't change my X. And I always say, well, you could change the people around you, or you don't have to have values for a company. There can be a team, a department, like an office, anything, right? I think the act of getting a group of people together and sit down and sort of say, what do we stand for, or and as we said, what do we not want to lose is more important than what do we want to be, which is sort of like, oh, we'd love to be like that. And well, we're not like that, we're like this. Well, what do we want to be? What do we want to keep? And then what do we want to jettison? That's just a great conversation to have, whether it's any scale from a company to a team. And the other thing we didn't write down that we were very clear on at the start is we didn't want to have basic human values. Like honesty, integrity, those sorts of things, those aren't, those should be kind of inherent or assumed in everything underneath there. So we sort of jettisoned those. I think otherwise you end up with this kind of set of platitudes that aren't really useful or instructive to people in any way, shape, or form. And the last thing I would say is it's okay if it's hard, right? We have long discussions internally about values, and especially where they cross each other, right? Any decision, I always say build with heart and balance is really my favorite, and it's like kind of it's the stepchild that gets used the least. But to me, it's my favorite because we're growing a company. It's a really hard thing to do, and we have to make a lot of difficult decisions. We have to make them with balance. We have to consider all the options, but we have to make them with passion. We have to want to go and do the decision, whatever it is, and caring and all the things that are involved in that. And that means considering all the options. And often two values will be contrary to each other, and that causes an interesting conversation to have. We wouldn't have that conversation without them. We just plow down one direction or the other. So I think it's okay if they cause discussion and debate, right? They're not simple answers. You don't just ask them a question and get back an answer. They don't work like that.
Do you have a favorite?
I don't have a favorite value. Do you have a favorite child?
Well, let me ask the question a different way then. So you're walking on a bridge that divides a body of water in half. 3 of your values are drowning on the left, 2 of your values are drowning on the right. You can only save one of them. Who do you save?
Do you have a favorite child? I did want to ask, though, the audience, apart from Atlassian, so Atlassians keep your hand down, apart from Atlassian, put your hand up if you can name all of your company's values. That would be about 5% of the audience, perhaps. Okay, hands down. If you're Atlassian, and I can't see anyone's faces, I'm not going to hold people accountable, but like at Atlassian, if you can name all 5 values, which I'd hope would be
Everyone knows it.
pretty easy.
If you're at Atlassian and you can read,
Put your hand up.
put your hand up.
No, I'm proud that you can go to Atlassian in the hallway and they will be able to name the 5 values. And I think that's a big accomplishment with 2,000 people, that it's so true to everything they do.
And how does that happen?
Indoctrination?
They're a lot.
We find a big
I think
screen.
it really is that they're alive. It's not that they change, and I'm kind of amazed that 10 years later they haven't changed in a weird, like, you kind of never know if you put the right things down. And we thought about it, we were conscientious about it, but know 10 years later if they're going to need to change, and they haven't, and that's fantastic. But they're talked about and they're alive. Like, they come up in conversation a lot, and that's the most important thing. They're not something that we wrote down and stuck in a drawer, right? They're on walls and they're around, and people use them in making decisions and in conversations. And that's what sort of passes them on, like some sort of, I don't know, weird storytelling tradition or something. I mean, they're not like a sort of, I don't know.
So I want to transition to the three things that we kind of planted in this deck that talk about that are really more rituals and practices for us as a business that deeply relate to the culture, but also relate to complementing products to help our teams. Before I do this, we are going to take audience Q&A, and you have to ask a question, or you need to ask a question through the mobile app. So if you haven't installed the mobile app and you want to ask a question, that's an incentive. You'll see, I think if you click on the Fireside in the agenda, you can see like a little hyperlink, submit a question, you click that, you can type it in, you can vote up questions, and I've got a little iPad here that I'll read from. So we'll save ample time, I think, to take your questions. So I want to start, one of the 3 things that I want to talk about is Project Central. And Mike, I think you were the original, the originator, the catalyst for what Project Central is and how we use it in the business. And so maybe just an open question to you of what is it? What is Project Central and how do we use it?
So we have an amazing board member. We have a lot of amazing board members, but one in particular of our amazing set of board members. Good to see so many of you in the audience, by the way. I didn't mean that one was particularly amazing. And he works at Facebook, and they have a tool. I think it may be called Project Central. I'm not sure, but it's a similar. And he was describing the idea behind this tool, and I thought it was really interesting that as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, you can't dictate methodology or how projects run. But what's the hardest thing is you get to be a bigger organization is actually project communication, right? You need a project communication tool, not a project management tool. And you want to let everybody manage their projects in their own individual way, but you need a way of communicating about things, and you need a way of categorizing things and understanding what is a project, what isn't a project. And so, in talking through this, we kind of came up with Project Central and the rituals around it and some of the things. I can't remember how many of them came from Facebook and how many of them we've evolved over time. But the basic idea is that it's a project communication tool. And what does that mean? Basically, you have to determine that there is a project to be run. I think it's I'm going to get the exact factoids wrong, but I think it's 2 people for 2 weeks or more. That equals a project. So it doesn't need to be masses of people. It's just a thing that's happening.
So that's a minimum. Is that a minimum level of what
I think that's a minimum bar. I'm looking for someone, Dom. Yep, there you go. 2 people, 2 weeks. Anything above that needs to have a Project Central entry, right? We happen to use JIRA to track it, which is kind of confusing because we have issues that are projects now. It's like very meta. It's a good tool. It has fields. It's very simple. It works, right? And the whole idea is you just get people to answer basic questions about their project, right? Like, what is it? I think we've got...
Yeah, maybe walk through. This is a Project Central ticket.
To get even more meta, this is actually an issue representing a project that is the project that is Project Central. So we probably could have chosen a better example.
This is,
Work with us through the layers of Inception we've got going on now.
This is Inception. This is JIRA Inception, right?
It is. It's like really deep down the stack. Basically, what are we doing, right? The first question is like, what are we trying to do? Write it down. Having to write it down is really important. It's sometimes hard. You ask people, what are you doing? They're like, well, we're sort of doing these. Okay, great. Second, like, why are we doing it, right? And you've got to justify why you're going to do it. The example I know they have at Facebook is you want to make another key value store. Why? There's 46. Tell me why you're making the 47th, and be really clear about that, right? How are we going to judge success? So super basic questions. When is it going to ship? Who's in charge? And how are we tracking? We're on target, right? And so really, really basic questions like what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And who's in charge? And it has a name and a reference and everything else. You can link in every report. So anybody who's like, you get into a big organization, you're like, okay, there's this thing, it's called Project Fairy Dust. And you're like, fuck's Fairy Dust? I haven't heard of it. I guess it's important. Where do I go look it up? Is there a central repository of all these things that I can go to? I don't mind going to Project Central and clicking off to your JIRA or your other thing or your wiki page or whatever you got. That's fine. But we need a central repo that says Fairy Dust is where I go to find it, right? And then when are you done? And who's in charge of it? I want to go talk to somebody. Who's the single person that I go and talk to, right? And so it has this kind of very simple set of questions. And then it's got a very simple ritual around it, which is that every Friday or Saturday, every project owner must go to the, in our case, JIRA issue and add a comment and reaffirm all of the fields. And they just have to say, yes, all these fields are accurate, and what's going on? Yep, we're on track, everything's going well, we're a little behind, we're worried about this, whatever. Not a huge status report. You want to write pages of stuff, put it elsewhere. We've got a different app for that. It's just literally a paragraph of text. Supposed to take 2 or 3 minutes. And the argument is, if you can't take 3 minutes to tell people where your project is at the end of the week, you may have things that you need to think about, right? It shouldn't be that hard to go and say, yep, we're on track, we're doing well, or we're not. You should know that. You're a project owner. So we force people to go and put that in. And then the part of the ritual that works is that all turns into an email that goes out to everybody. So we have a Connect add-on that you can watch any project, and then you get an email of the status updates of every project you're watching. And so the idea there is that in a big organization, you don't know who cares about your deliverable. You don't know if someone's just interested in Fairy Dust, or they're depending on Fairy Dust, or they're 2 levels down the chain. And so one person honestly answers the questions, and the other person gets an email about all the things they're interested in, sort of like a one-directed graph kind of a thing. And it works really well. So everyone gets these emails. I get 45 updates on a Monday morning, all the updates, and it's like the first thing I read, and I can go in, I can ask people questions. It's just like a really useful communication tool. It's working pretty well. It's relatively new for us, about 9 months, I think.
How many projects in Project Central now? Do you know off the top of your head?
Hundreds. I don't know where we're up to now.
And then what about like maybe Scott?
And it's not just for technical projects. I should say that it's for every. So like HR, finance, anybody running a project should put it in. You don't know if you're in the finance team and someone in technology needs to care about it, or if you're in HR and someone wants. It shouldn't matter who's caring and who's watching. That's the whole sort of point, is that it's very undirected. Oh, and the other rule I should mention that we've evolved over time. Your answers should be honest and correct. Right? This is not about penalizing you. If your date's going to move, you move it. And you move it as quickly as you know it's going to move, because the whole point is communication to the rest of the organization. If you communicate as early as possible that your date's moving for whatever reason, everybody else can adapt. If you wait and the day before go, actually we're going to be 3 months late, whoever's down the chain from you is suddenly like, wait a second. I've been watching this for months and it was on track and now it's behind, and that's when you have some conversations. So don't not move dates, be factually accurate with the answers.
So what impact do you think this has had on teams and how we work at Atlassian?
It's been huge. Atlassian, as you know, is all about teams. We want to get teams more productive, and what we try and do is build that into our products, JIRA and Confluence and HipChat, all the products that you use to make teams more effective. But sometimes it's not necessarily a product, it's a way of working or a tool or a technique. And we wanted to share this because it's been really useful for us. And I wish we'd done it a lot earlier. I don't think you need to be thousands of people for this to be really useful. The simple act of 5 minutes a week updating things would make smooth a lot of the busy work that goes on around an organization. And so, I do every Monday come in and say, hey, okay, what are the projects I care about? How are they tracking? And it's a really good way for me to organize my week. What's behind, and we need to change things. So
maybe describe a little bit, if people are interested in taking their own instances of JIRA and building a project communication system like this. Like, you mentioned a Connect add-on. Like, what are some of the other configuration secret sauce that we had to put into this version of JIRA to make it work?
A bunch of custom fields, all stock standard text fields largely. People add comments, and then, as I said, there's a very simple Connect add-on that just runs JQL. I think it pulls all the things down. It's a little node app that sits there. It pulls it all down, pulls down the watches, and then it cross-references watches and issues and just sends out an email to each individual person, gets an individualized email of all the things that they're watching. It's, I don't know,
we're making
a couple thousand lines of JavaScript now. It's not very complicated.
We're in the process of making that available, so I don't think everyone needs to roll it themselves. I'm not sure if, Dom, is your session talking about... Yep, so there's a session on later in the conference that hopefully will be well attended with all this publicity, and Dom will go through not only Project Central, but some other things we're going to go through today. And so in that session, you can really learn how to get started.
Last question.
I was going to say one other thing that's been really interesting, thinking of Dom, who runs program management at Atlassian down the front here. I think initially the program managers we have were a bit scared about this tool. Like, hey, wait, isn't that what we do? And like a lot of classic Atlassian journeys, they've kind of gone, actually, this is really good, because what it does is it teaches everybody to be a little bit of a project manager and answer the right 5 questions that the program management department is a bit sick of asking people, right? They're used to doing this stuff, and they just assume everybody has these answers. And you'd be amazed how many projects we have that are going on that people can't answer 5 simple questions. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who's in charge? They're like, maybe we should think about that, right? But it lets program management do the really high-value, hard work of cross-functional things and big programs, and individuals to do the basic, simple project management. So,
any features missing that you'd want to add to it? Or you'd want people to add to it for you?
We could make it prettier, probably. We haven't spent a lot of time on the UI. It's just JIRA with some workflow. It doesn't lead itself to, you have to understand, everyone in our organization understands JIRA, obviously, so it's quite easy for them to pick up kind of thing. But like from the outside, it's like, wait, I create an issue and it's a project. And
got it. Let's move on to the second one. The second one is Health Monitor. I think that's really about improving team communication and connecting a big part of the org to the movement of projects and activity across projects. Health Monitor is more about I think taking a temperature check on how teams are really performing. So maybe, Scott, talk about where Health Monitor came from, and then describe what it is. And I've got an image here that you can kind of talk through more specifically.
So as a founder of a company, it always pains me when every person in the company doesn't know how to run a project, or they don't know what's going on. When we solve some of that with Project Central, but sometimes you walk into a project and go, okay, well, it seems like it's off track or on track. And people would look at me like I have some sort of voodoo knowledge about how to, do things well. and we try to capture what are the things that we really care about, what do we think are the real true indicators of project health and team health. And so we created a health monitor, and we dressed up one of our program managers as a doctor, and he went around the world and did about 200 of these health monitor checks around Atlassian, and almost every one of our staff members has been part of it. And we track the team health. We get everyone in a room, and the process is that you have to answer these 8 questions. Is there a full-time owner? Is the team balanced? Do we have shared understanding? So forth. And generally speaking, I think it's quite a clever thing to do, is the person running this splits the team into 2 halves, and they go to 2 ends of the room and said, well, independently, fill in this health monitor. And then they come back together and share it. And that's instructive because often people have different views on the project. One end of the room, everything's red, and one end of the room's everything green, and that's a good discussion point to start with. Or if everything's green, you then start with saying, well, who is the full-time owner? And there's 4 answers, and you go, okay, well, we're not actually as green as we thought. And so we've systematically gone through every team in the business and run this 3 to 4 hour health monitor check. And once you've done that, teams then go, okay, I can understand that we're on track or off track and the areas that we need to improve. And it gives you a language as opposed to just, we're not doing stuff well. Okay, well, why and what would you do to improve it? Now it's, okay, we're not doing well because we actually don't have a shared understanding of our vision, or actually, our dependencies, we don't know who they are and we're not managing them well. And so our teams now have this language they can talk to each other with. And it's been a huge change across the entire company in how effective our teams have been. And we've done it not only for engineering teams, we've done it for marketing teams, our customer-facing organizations. Apparently all the executive assistants got together and did it, but I'm not allowed to know the results. So we've really done this across the entire organization.
And it should be said, just to zoom out, it's largely just a conversation that forces a team to think through certain things, right? There's not really it's a process that you can follow, but it's not a software project, right? It's just, how do you judge a team to be healthy? We've kind of evolved these categories over time that trigger the right questions for teams to ask to try to diagnose their own health level and work out what they should be working on, right? It's a meeting, it's a conversation, it's not a software tool, right? It's a ritual. Who
facilitates this, inside the company?
We started off having one person who went around the world and did it to all the teams, and that was really useful because that person got to hone the process. And now we find teams are adopting it themselves, so they'll run their own health monitors, maybe getting someone else from a different team to facilitate. But we know it's successful now because teams themselves are saying, actually, hey, this quarter we should run one of these health monitors and see how we're going as a team.
Yeah, right. And and I imagine team health changes too, sometimes by the nature of a project or sort of what they're working on.
It's good to check, right? Teams change all the time. People come, people go, people get moved, team goals change, the world changes underneath the team, all sorts of things. It's useful for them to come back and do this. And again, a mark of success for me for the health monitor is that teams are now, like initially it was like, someone wants to come in and do a health check on our team. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Like, what if they say something bad, And now teams are actually putting up their hand and saying, hey, can we get one of the sort of health monitor experts to come in and help us run a facilitated session? They're requesting it. They're asking for it because they see it's useful. And the other thing you see is when teams start to realize they're going a bit astray or the project is off, they say, stop. The first thing we're going to do is run a health monitor session and see where we're at, right? And get the team to have this conversation and discover and say, here's why we're off track, right? Teams have a good sense, I think, when it's not working really well. But often it can be hard for them to have the language to explain why it's not working really well. Right? What exactly is going wrong? And to be able to say, actually, we have a really good understanding of what we're trying to do, but we have dependency problems all over the place. Okay, well, what are we going to do about that? It helps facilitate the discussion to make them happy.
So you guys are a team of founders and CEOs. Have you done a health monitor on?
We haven't.
We didn't get past full-time owner.
We could do one right now. So we do actually have a guy. I think there's a session at Summit over the next 2 days on, when is it? Thursday morning on Health Monitor. We've also published there's a URL at the end of this deck. We published a guide to running this Health Monitor practice or process for you if you'd like to try at your company. So both go see the session, and then I'll show you the URL.
And Health Monitor is also great, I would say, because Project Central requires a bit more organizational buy-in to track projects across a large set, right? It's not really useful if you just do it yourself. Whereas, I mean, they're good questions to ask, but you might as well just write it on a piece of paper and stick it in a drawer. Whereas Health Monitor, I think anyone can go to their team and say, hey, let's do this team, right? I only need the 5 people around me to go run this. I don't need anybody else in my organization to care. So it's a different kind of a tool like that. It's really useful for everyone to take away to their team.
Right. Third ritual, my favorite, and one that maybe a lot of you are familiar with because we've done it at Summit if you've been here before, but Shipit. So just to set a little bit of context, over the past year, we produced a little bit of an internal video on what Shipit's like at Atlassian, and I thought we'd just set the stage with that video. So maybe we just roll the video really quick.
To me, it's 24 hours of unlimited opportunity.
Like, it's all about the creativity. It's all about being daring and a bit nuts, and do it collectively. There's nothing like a team of people doing something crazy.
It's very energizing, to be honest. You can really feel the energy.
Sorry, folks, obviously there's a technical issue there. We're working on that.
Tap dance. We're working on it for how long?
We're going to be, anyone good at IT here? Do we have anyone
no computers?
We need an IT
who
guy.
understands technical systems of any kind?
Hey.
To me, it's 24 hours of unlimited opportunity.
Like, it's all about the creativity. It's all about being daring and a bit nuts, and do it collectively. There's nothing like a team of people doing something crazy.
It's very energizing, to be honest. You can really feel the energy.
Everyone's always brimming with ideas, too many ideas to even do with one Shipit or like the next 10 Shipits.
For me personally, it's a bit of my competitive streak. It's nice to get that out of your system once every 3 months.
I'm now pro with the button press machine. I think I'm okay to run a political campaign now.
I think that's a kind of exciting direction that Shipit's starting to take. But we've had all sorts of really interesting, like what we call non-technical projects recently.
The idea that we started with is not the idea we ended up with, so the initial idea was mine, but then it went through a lot of shaping and molding to get to what it is now. Then it has a fancy post-it dispenser. Yeah, that's amusing every time we do it.
Pivoting is a definite integral part of Shipit. Teams do change direction based on obstacles that they run into, what they discover is achievable within the time period.
So now's probably a good time to give you a how-to guide for Shipit. Shipit's incredibly simple. It starts with ideas and individuals. Those individuals then seek out other people to form teams and brainstorm further. Then the 24-hour countdown clock starts and they start creating some awesome ideas and awesome solutions. There's one simple ask at the end of those 24 hours. 3-minute lightning talk to their peers for the ultimate prize, bragging rights.
Shipit started as a hackathon. Some of our engineers, and we had a very small number. We could all fit around a table. We went to each person's computer to watch the demos.
These days, thousands of people in all our offices around the world participate. The grand finals are so large now that they get live streamed into different rooms because we can't all fit into one room.
Anyone for any chocolate? Keep your appetites up, energy up for all your ideas. Salt and sugar primarily.
That's awesome.
I think the most important part of Shipit for me is we don't take ourselves too seriously. That's the way that I think collaboration and innovation should be.
It's more complex than we initially thought.
I learned to not be too ambitious in all the things that you can think you can build in 24 hours.
Don't look at the stack trace. That means bad things have happened.
A lot of us got into programming because we fell in love with that roller coaster ride of highs and lows when your code goes from being almost ready to being completely broken in a matter of seconds. And I guess Shipit lets us relive a little bit of that.
We've broken something, yeah, at the last minute.
And it should kind of vanish after 30 seconds, and it should be a lot nicer. Yeah, now it's much nicer. It has the shadows. Maybe we need some sleep now.
We know it's a world first because it was so freaking difficult nobody else will attempt it.
it's really fun when you get up there and you present and people really appreciate it and you're like, oh, that was really cool, you know, a sense of like recognition. And then when you see other people who are like amazing stuff gets happening, you just feel like you work for the most incredible place in the world.
I think we had about 300 entries for Shipit 30, so it's a very large number of teams.
When you look back over the past 10 years, the number of things that started as a Shipit project and kind of blossomed into a full-blown project, there's countless examples of that.
Shipit exists in perpetuity. What we find is that the end of one Shipit in our presentations is the start of the next one as people start creating and canvassing their ideas and creating their teams and thinking about what they want to do next quarter.
You wouldn't got it if you knew how much it cost.
I mean, winning at Shipit is everybody wins.
The winner of Shipit 30, the 10-year anniversary is...
Awesome. So maybe just spend 5 minutes on Shipit. You mentioned a little bit about the history, but what was the original catalog? Where did the idea to do it come from, and what problem were you solving when you decided to do it?
Look, I mean, people have had hackathons and all sorts of things for a while, and we wanted to codify that into the culture. We wanted to make it, we wanted to get people to get out of their comfort zone and try some new things. I think it's one of the ingredients of a hackathon. Adding the competitive streak's been quite interesting. The voting and the forced demonstrations and presentations makes people, I think, step up a little bit of a level. I think the thing, maybe we didn't think about at the start, but it's come clear over time, is it's also a clear indication to all the staff that we value innovation, that it's important that we create this time and we don't know what you're going to do with it, but you go do amazing things. And there's a really important message in there on a constant basis, right? We do it once a quarter, so every 3 months, a whole day goes towards people just working on whatever it is they want to work on and showing their colleagues how amazing they can be, and then everyone's looking around thinking, wow, look at all these things that are going on, and then they think, I want to work with that person on that, and it just kind of creates a bit of a chaotic melting pot of goodness that happens that I don't think we kind of scripted it as such. We just kind of wanted to play with stuff and take a day off work to play with new things.
Well, what are the virtues of Shipit over something like 20% time that I think is also kind of an exercise in innovation that some companies pursue?
There's a few things I think Shipit works really well at Atlassian for. Like you said, we value innovation, but I think we also value that every person in the company participates in innovation. And I think that's different because often you can end up with companies where you've got an R&D lab in a corner somewhere, and a lot of people are implementing stuff, but we don't really want to use their brains as much. And so we really value that every person in the company gets to participate in Shipit. And I think that the competitive aspect and the fact that it's once a quarter means that people really think and look forward to it. It's conversation in hallways. It gets the entire company there. There's a higher correlation between people that stay there overnight and work through the night and winning Shipit. So people end up working through the night, and that's got a whole bunch of energy when there's hundreds of people in the office at 10 p.m. At night working towards Shipit. We tried to make a big deal of sort of telling people how we do it. Does anyone in the audience have run their own Shipit as a result? So it's probably like nice. 5 or 10% of the audience. Highly recommend it. When I advise some other startup companies, and companies ask us, how to improve them, the way they work. A Shipit really is a very small investment. We've got all the docs online for how to run one, and so if there's one thing to take away from Summit, or go back to your organization and see if you can get your team to go run a Shipit.
It was sort of birthed as a hackathon, as largely an exploration of engineering and what developers could do. How have we encouraged involving other teams, and how has Shipit evolved at Atlassian to include other teams?
I think one of the craziest things I've seen was when there was a meeting room, we moved into someone else's space, we took a new floor in the building, and we haven't yet redecked it, and they took a really small meeting room that was too small for us and turned that into a speakeasy with actually a hidden bookshelf hiding the door. And so their whole thing was in 24 hours, they built effectively a hidden secret alcohol bunker inside Atlassian as their
They built a whiskey tasting bar in a meeting room.
It's a whiskey tasting bar, yeah, and you can book it. It's actually on the meeting room calendar.
You can book it on our meeting room booking system, and
if you can find it.
Yeah, there was a bunch of technical people that wanted to do something different, and that's fine. So they took all the technical books, old ones we had, and like cut all the pages off, so you just had the spines, and they glued them all on the door, so it looks like a big bookshelf, and there's wood paneling inside, and all sorts of things. They went off to
We've had all sorts of crazy.
Home Depot, I guess, is equivalent, and bought a bunch of stuff, and it was awesome. They
People
put
in
lights
San
and everything in it.
Francisco, we had for years these meeting rooms that were one-person phone booths that had, I don't know who'd thought putting these really like fancy-looking but extremely hot light bulbs in these tiny meeting rooms. So no one would use them because you'd just sweat the whole time. And someone's Shipit was going and changing 100 light bulbs.
That's right.
And they recruited a different person to change each and every light bulb in the building and took a photo of it, right? So their Shipit was...
I think so they could win the largest team prize.
Yeah, I think they said they could win the largest team prize, yeah.
Which founders won the most Shipits? Mike?
Controversial. Well, technically Scott has won more Shipits. Or I should say...
What's the technicality?
Well, he was on a team of 11.
Oh.
Well, someone who hasn't
won
won
an
a Shipit
honorary win.
That's right. He's won 1/11 of a Shipit.
Yeah.
Any favorite standout Shipit projects, like of recent memory, that have blown your minds? And like, what tends to blow your mind at Shipit? Outside of, I think the energy, what specific things do you tend to get amazed by?
I mean, you get amazing demos, and some people can just present stuff really well, and they do it in raps, or they do it in all sorts of different formats of presentation, and creating physical goods are quite interesting to present, things like that. I love when people now, we have team sizes that vary up to large teams, and some people try to attempt amazingly ambitious things with large teams. Actually, I have seen teams do team health monitors in a Shipit, like for 5 minutes, let's all check we're doing the right thing kind of thing. Just that's a good meta comment. I think the things that always blow me away the most is we have quite a lot of single people that win. And it's quite amazing if you think that you have all these teams around you, 5, 6, 7, 10 people, and sometimes one person can win. And often the people that win with one person, they take like one customer pain point and they go solve it. And sometimes it's been around for years. Sometimes they've just been thinking about it for ages. They bring up a bunch of comments. The reason they're asking for votes is to say, here's a quote from a customer, here's another quote from a customer, here's another quote from a customer. I went and solved this, right? And I really like those where they've thought about what it is that they're doing. It's not necessarily technology innovation, it's not necessarily a big song and dance, but they're thoughtful about what they've gone and solved.
So maybe we've got about 10 minutes for audience Q&A, so I want to transition out of that. One brief plug for the things that we made available on the back of this talk. There's 3 things. There's a guide for the health monitor. There's a guide on how to run Shipit. And then we actually, someone, I think for a Shipit project, wrote a plugin for JIRA that turns JIRA into a Shipit voting system. And so we've made that plugin available. So there's 3 things, I think, at this link, if you're interested in any of those 3 that we've made available. Let's transition into some audience questions through the app now. And I'm going to focus on questions that are related to culture mostly. So if I skip some of the other ones that are in here, it's either because they're not related to culture or because I know that we're going to cover them over the next 2 days. And so I want to let the people that are going to announce them over the next 2 days be able to announce them. One is, as we've grown, maybe to you, Scott, did you value organization and hierarchy or creative chaos?
It's a good question. I don't think there's a right answer there. I think, and if you had to pick the two, I think Mike is more on the creative chaos side and I'm on more of the organization side. So I think we have a bit of yin and yang there, which I think is really, really helpful. I think that either way you die. If you have too much chaos, nothing gets done. You can create a whole bunch of things that never reach customers, but ultimately, reason most technology companies die is they don't innovate and don't create stuff, and that process of creation is extremely messy. There's no nice way to sort of say, well, we're going to create something amazing for our customers, and let's do it in this logical fashion. You throw stuff out, you get frustrated, you tear it all up, you go back and you start again, and that process of like creating something truly new is just ugly and messy.
Mike, this is, I think, related to culture, but also related to adoption of our products. What advice do you have for teams where a handful of departments of the company are integrated in JIRA and or Confluence, but other parts of the company are disconnected from it. What advice do you have, I think, for that kind of a situation?
I guess it would depend why they were disconnected from it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it helps if people are using common tools, but I think you can understand a lot from everybody else's tools. Obviously, we think our tools are really good, and we work really hard on making them solve as many problems and customers as we can. So maybe try to communicate. I mean, we've always strongly pushed success as the biggest sort of antidote to progress, right? Or not antidote, the biggest contributor. So if your team is running really well, just maybe communicate that. Say, hey, look, this tool's really helping us, and then it'll spread and get across, and maybe you can learn something from the other tools as well, and teams.
Yeah, with JIRA specifically, we found that we released Service Desk 2 years ago, and it's an interesting product because it can be used for so many different ways. And we found that within teams, you use JIRA and rapid boards and a backlog, and that's great for within a team. But when you're interacting with other teams, often a service desk is nice because you can hide a lot of that complexity of what your own team does behind the service desk. And we found that inside Atlassian, we use a service desk across all of our departments. Our legal team have a legal service desk. So if you want a contract reviewed, instead of emailing the legal department and hopefully getting lost in the black hole of legal review, you can create a ticket, and you set the contract value and how important it is and when it's due and other things. And the legal team will then prioritize that work based on, a contract of less than a certain amount gets, done in 24 hours, and more than a certain amount might take a week, but then where it's going. And that's been really good for, the legal team to they can use JIRA internally, but people outside, it's as easy as using email and really simple. So sometimes it might be easier to use a service desk to bring your teams in. Or conversely, maybe the use case for JIRA internally is complicated, but you're trying to convince the HR team to use JIRA. If they could use a service desk with their customers, that might be a way for them to get started as well.
Right. We talked about communication with Project Central. This is a question around objective setting and alignment around objectives within teams and within the company. And so the question is how do you ensure alignment with the top things that are the most important to the company with individual objectives? So I think the question is around OKRs, and maybe describe how we do that at Atlassian.
I mean, I'll tell you, the first thing I think, and it comes back to open company, is that when you ask people to innovate and do things, it really needs to understand where the company is going. And so we go to great pains to be open and transparent internally about the issues we're having, the things that we want to overcome over the next year, and really set those high-level objectives. And we call it a VTFM, which is the vision, the themes, what's the F stand for? I've forgotten now. Focus areas and measures. And so basically that is our document that we change infrequently and guides all of Atlassian, because as you grow you can't cascade everything down perfectly, but if everyone knows the big rocks that we're trying to achieve, then we can make their own individual decisions.
Yep.
And the way we try and align that is OKRs, and I think you can talk a bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the OKR there's lots and lots of good goal-setting frameworks. I think OKRs is one that identifies with the way that we sort of think and work, and it has a bit of stretch in it, and it's not kind of like a simple framework. And you can read up on that online a lot, and again, it can be opted in a single team. I think the importance is understanding the framework and the language more than just you should set goals. It's too easy to say your team doesn't have goals and then set really poor goals or not stretchy enough or whatever. And so I think OKRs has the right ingredients of that.
And what are OKRs?
Oh, sorry. It's objectives and key results. I mean, there's a huge, not huge, but like a explanation. And basically the idea is that objectives should be really hard to achieve. And then the key results should be subjective, and then the key results should be objective. And then the key results underneath it, get graded, so they all have to be scoreable from 0 to 1. You should aim for a 0.7, et cetera. I mean, you can read through the system as goal-setting system, but it's been quite useful for us.
So there's a couple of softballs in here for you guys. One for you, Mike, that was directed specifically at you, and it was asked twice in 2 different ways, and both of them were voted up a lot, so I'm going to ask them both. The question for you, Mike, is how do you keep your beard so perfectly scraggly all the time?
My what?
Then, how do you keep your beard so perfectly scraggly? And then the second version of that question, which is important to read, is how do you keep your beard so perfectly scraggly without it growing into something capital Z, lowercase z, lowercase z, lowercase z, which I don't know what that means, but it was interesting enough to ask.
You just
natural.
Shave it every so often, and then you let it do its thing, and then you start again at the top.
Scott, the softball for you is, what is your favorite Christmas movie, and why is it Die Hard? Such a great question.
I do love It's a Wonderful Life, though. Like, if you can actually, yeah.
That's a great Christmas movie. What's like? How often do you guys disagree? And maybe what's been the biggest kind of recent disagreement? And then how do the two of you, resolve it? I mean, you've been a team for 13 years, and so like, how do you resolve disagreements? And what are the things that you disagree on?
I mean, we get asked this a lot. I mean, we don't disagree very much, which is a good thing. We kind of have an open respect and dialogue, like I think you need to have in any good relationship, an ability to say, I don't like that idea, or vice versa. I think we always feel like if we can't convince the other person something's a good idea, then it's probably not, and it's probably on our side that it's a problem. And maybe we need to think, maybe you need some different way of communicating it or whatever, but like, there's kind of a healthy, way of working there. I can't think of the last major thing that was a huge disagreement. We always get asked this. I don't think we have any good answers. Would you have a good answer?
I just think we're lucky we have two people to do one job. I wish, I'm sure more people in the audience would wish to have two people to do their job. So we're lucky, and I guess having two different perspectives makes it incredibly powerful. We haven't disagreed too much.
It's kind of related to us and our culture naturally, but there's a question about where Atlassian's name originated from. And then I think a related question around the icon.
Charlie? Sure, the name is, I was, subjected sounds too rich. I did a lot of Latin and ancient Greek in school. My mom was a big classics nut, so I kind of picked up a lot from her and did that. And Atlas was a Greek titan. So before the gods were a handful of titans, and his was a bad dude, actually. He wasn't a very good guy, and so his punishment was that he was holding up the sky. So the mythology was that he was standing on top of what are now the Atlas Mountains. I think they're in Greece, Turkey border sort of area. And he was theoretically standing on top of the Atlas Mountains, and he was holding the sky, and that's why it was up there, the blue, etc. Bit of science probably know that's not true nowadays, but that was what was theoretically happening, right? And randomly he tricked Hercules into holding up the sky for a little while, and then Hercules held up the sky, and he tricked him and got it back, so he was still there. And we just sort of turned it into an adjective, made an Atlassian effort. We thought it was sort of the original customer service. We started as a service and support company, and so we thought it was kind of a large effort of service to the world to hold up the sky. And so, that's where the name came from. Charlie, the logo, is kind of interesting. Does anyone notice something that's wrong about Charlie in every picture of Atlas that you've ever seen? Think about it. Think the Rockefeller statue, the Rockefeller Center, there's a big statue of Atlas and all that? No? Yeah, it's backwards. So he's actually holding up, like we've sort of made the curve of the Earth, but every statue of Atlas has him holding the world, like the globe, rather than the sky, which he actually held, which would be the other way around. So for whatever reason, he's always pictured as holding up the Earth, but he actually didn't. He held up the sky, so we continued the tradition.
If you could solve one customer pain point, this is a product question, one customer pain point personally, what would it be? Scott. That's a doozy of a question.
So many. And no matter what I say, everyone else in the audience is going to be angry at me because I didn't solve their particular customer pain point. I think one of the I'll chat about this tomorrow morning in the keynote, but we have this great, the greatness of Atlassian's products is they're flexible, configurable, but also some people, and maybe some people in this room, set them up too flexibly and too, hey, here's 25 mandatory fields you need to fill in JIRA before you can raise a ticket with the IT team. And then their customers talk to us and say, well, I really hate using JIRA. And we say, well, why is that? Because there's 25 fields I need to fill in. And I go, well, okay, yeah, I guess that's partly our problem, but they blame us for that. So if there was some way, a sort of product pain point, it's not necessarily features or anything like that. It's helping people in the audience have all the best practices from around the world, from everyone else in this audience, to configure and set our products up to have that right balance of flexibility and the simplicity that the customers require. So hopefully people get all of that from the conference. That's one of the reasons we started Summit is so that you can share all those stories and best practices and other things because our tools are so flexible. But if I could wave a magic wand, I'd love to do that.
Mike?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of things we're constantly working on trying to solve, right?
You could phone a friend.
I mean, I guess it would maybe performance. Like we're always trying to make things faster, and we talk about it tomorrow a lot. But it's hard, and it's always a balance. And we're working really, really hard on making it faster every single release, and making it fast enough to meet everybody's bar fast enough would be, if I could solve one thing tomorrow. But it's not easy to do. We're working on it really hard.
Last question for you guys before we break for drinks. This is your 7th year at Summit. What do you hope to get out of the next 2 days, personally?
I want to hear everyone's stories. It's incredibly exciting. We have 250 Atlassians here, not only to help you, but to hear your stories, because we can take those stories back and make incredible products to solve your problems. And you are doing some amazing things in the world, not only just with our products, but just software is absolutely changing the face of every business, every aspect of daily life, and it's you in the audience who are doing that. And I'd love to spend time and hear how each and every one of you are changing the world with software. That would be a great thing for me.
Yeah, I think, the two things I get out of Summit is we don't get a lot of face-to-face interaction with our customers, so it's just really awesome to be able to say thank you and talk to them, and and do that in person is kind of a really interesting and important part about Summit for us. And then the second thing is the learning. Like you guys and girls use our products in ways they were never intended for, and to do all sorts of interesting things and have your own best practices, and I'm sure you have your own health monitors and all that. And I find to actually learn as much from our customers about how to use our tools that even we can take back and then build a better company internally from. So, I guess it comes from customer stories and talking to people, but I always find I learn a lot. I go home with a notebook full of things that we could do better in years ahead. So, I look forward to doing that every year.
Awesome. That concludes Fireside. Thank you to you guys for starting Atlassian to begin with, for giving me a job. Hopefully, I still have it tomorrow. And also for helping put on a great event. And thank you to all of you for coming. We're in this room tomorrow at 9 a.m. For the keynote. We've got drinks outside. All Atlassians are wearing this royal blue shirt, so hunt them down and meet as many of us as you can. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you.